Hi and welcome back to my channel. In this video you have part 1 of my amazing readathon wrap-up, vlogs, etc. It's not really going to be a vlog because I'm reading so many books that I have a lot to talk about. I have 2 massive stacks over here because, spoiler alert, halfway through the month I have read 49 books. Now, before you think, are you doing anything else with your life? The answer is not really, but also over, I think 20 of them are graphic novels and manga because we had face-off weekend to end off the first half of the month. So yes, 49 books in 15 days, but a significant chunk of them were graphic novels and manga. I have physically these books. Let me go through these. So I have this standing in for T-Dragon Society, which is book 1 in this series. I read that on Hoopla. I have The Prince and the Dressmaker. I have Spy Family Volume 6. It's out of order, but I also have Batman Nightwalker, Skip, Airwolf Monsters in Middle School. This was adorable. I loved it. Unicorn Boy, Kira and the Maybe Space Princess. This one was weird. And then I also have the other Spy Family books that I read this weekend. We have 3, 4, and 5. So of the ones that I own, I just didn't get to volume 7. I believe there are 12 volumes out, so I need to get 5 more volumes of that, but I still love Spy Family. Those are the ones that I had physically. So one of the things about the Amazing Readathon is because it's travel-based, you can earn more points if you fly to certain destinations, but you're not given enough currency at the beginning of the readathon to do that, so you have to read host favorites to earn more, among other things. So I decided to try 2 of the manga series that were mentioned for host favorites. One of them was talked about highly in my team chat, and the other one was mentioned. It would be an easy way, quick, get items read plus more currency on face-off weekend because you didn't have to worry about genre bonuses on face-off weekend and not earning those, etc. On Sunday, basically, I read 4 volumes of Dinosaur Sanctuary. That one is adorable. I really wish that there were more volumes of that so I could read it. And then I also read 6 volumes of E. McCoy. That one was so sickly, syrupy, sweet. And then just the romances started to go downhill in the latter half. They were easy to read. I thought it was going to be more smutty, as some romance manga can be. This one was not. I got the currency. Is it a favorite? Am I going to read the other 3 novels of E. McCoy? No. So that is a lot for face-off weekend. So if we take that out, I've been trying to read a minimum of 2 books per day. And I tried over the weekend as well, but I'm a little bit behind on that. I know, 49 books. On Sunday, I didn't read anything besides Dinosaur Sanctuary and E. McCoy. So I'm a little behind on my 2 actual books read. That's neither here nor there. But that means I still have 2 massive stacks over here. And if I took the time to talk about every single one of them, this video would take far too long. Also, it probably never would have gotten made because there's no way that I want to try to talk about all of them. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to first mention the books that I read that I do not have physically, and then I am going to go through the books that I've read in the order starting from beginning of the month until current day. And when I get to the standout ones, I'm going to stop and I'm going to talk about those a little bit more in depth. Although one of them I did talk about more in depth in SESL because it is one of my SESL books, but I will mention it so that way it's more reasonable. So the books that I do not have physically are A Psalm for the Wild Build. That was one where one of the legs, my team, came in last, so we had an additional prompt that we had to fulfill. It was very difficult to fulfill this because I didn't have a lot available to me at the time because I was out of town. I was in Chicago for the half marathon. That made things difficult. But that one was short and it was a host favorite, so I could also get some more currency for that one. Did I enjoy it as much? It was fine. I won't be reading the sequel in this duology. It was just fine. I also read Heart and Souls. This was to fulfill a sightseeing prompt, It is an ARC that I have. It was the sightseeing prompt that, it was either 500 or 400, but it was published in my birth month. And that was one that I didn't pre-plan because I wasn't sure. So what I ended up doing is I went to NetGalley and I looked at the ones that are going to be published this July, so next month, and just chose one of those. I also have 2 SESL books that my library does not have physical copies of, and one of them can't really find copies practically anywhere. The first of those is Wrecked by Heather Henson. I will be talking more about both of these in, I think, part 5 of my SESL project. And the last one that I don't have physically that was really hard to get a hold of is Spells for Lost Things by Jenna Evans Welch. So those are the ones that I don't have physically. Now I'm going to go through in order that I read them. The first book that I finished this month is Daughters of a Dead Empire. I talked about this in SESL Project Part 4. Then we have Lawless Spaces by Corianne Haydu. I also read this. This was my first physical read, so I don't actually remember which one I finished first. I finished them both on the same day. This is also for SESL, and I also talked about this one in Part 4 of that project. Then we have The Great Divide by Cristina Enriquez. This is one that I considered reading for Readathon, I believe, but didn't get to. This is a historical book set around the building of the Panama Canal, and it talks about a lot more perspectives than I was expecting. It didn't quite live up to what I hoped it would, but it was still decent. I think this was a 4 stars, so I will be keeping this. I don't remember 100%. Then we have one that I talked about in SESL Project Part 4, but I need to get a physical copy of this because this was my first standout of the month. This is Ain't Burned All the Bright by Jason Reynolds, art by Jason Griffin. The way that the text and the art works together in this book is phenomenal. They are both, I consider them co-authors. I ended up using this for the prompt for exactly 5 words in the title, Ain't Burned All the Bright. It wasn't one that I pulled off for that, but I'm trying to get through all my SESL books. I have only one of those left. When you have the combination of the art and the text, it just works together so well, and it deals with such difficult, impactful topics. Please go watch my SESL Project Part 4. I talked at length about this one in that book. Then we have Futureland, Battle for the Park by H.G. Hunter. This is a near future sci-fi. The main character's parents have created this traveling amusement park that has all kinds of scientific advancements. They end up going back to Atlanta where his parents are from, and then things ensue from there. It had a really unique concept, and I'm glad that I read this one. I read this for the prompt of a game. Yes, there being a game. This was the sightseeing prompt. Unfortunately, there were a few things that just didn't quite gel, didn't quite work out together for me. So this is a 3.5 stars and will ultimately get unhauled. I do consider this a win for having read this. Actually, you know, I may go ahead and just put this in my classroom library because it's not bad. And it does have a male protagonist, and this might be something that appeals to my students. I talked myself out of unhauling a book. What am I doing? I don't know. So next we have another SESL book. I have not filmed part 5 at the time of filming this video because I do have one more book yet to go, but I will talk about this book in more detail. That is Overground Railroad, The Green Book, and the Roots of Black Travel in America. I discovered that there is a young reader's version of this, and that's the version that I saw at the media center of my old school. I do not know how to get a hold of the young reader's version. And even this, the way that it's laid out, it was very easy to read, digestible, laid out really well. I think this could be in a classroom. So we'll talk more about the difference. I was going to go on and talk about appeal, but that's for my SESL video. This was definitely good, and I read this for a prompt because I'm trying to fit all of them into the prompts, but I don't remember what prompt this filled. Then we have a book which helped me with another one of my goals, and that is clearing off old series from my TBR. This is the penultimate book in the Sisters Grimm series. Not really all that much to say about it. It was fine. It was good. Better than some of the entries in this have been. I am almost done with this series. Then we have the first book that I finished on my Chicago trip, and that is Real Americans by Rachel Khong. Well, not the first book. It's one that I finished there. And I remember it because I was listening to it when we were walking back to the hotel after the race. This book confirmed to me that, once again, this is the generational type story is not really my favorite. And also there were just some things about it that just didn't quite sit right with me. They were fine, but I don't understand the point of Real Americans as the title because that didn't seem to be what it was about. So the synopsis didn't quite fit the book. It's a well-written book. It's a debut, I believe, so really good for a debut. It just didn't gel with me, so 3.5 stars, and ultimately this one will be getting on hold. Next we have The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School. I talked at length about this in SCASL Project Part 4. The next 2 books I am going to talk about in Part 5 of my SCASL project. I have very complicated thoughts about the life and crimes of Hoodie Rosen. Very conflicted even as I was reading this one. And then we have one that I knew that I wasn't going to be a huge fan of. It's typical rom-com romance. It's The Do-Over by Lynn Painter, sort of a Groundhog Day on Valentine's Day romance novel. Then we have another one of my standouts that I'm going to talk a little bit about, and that is Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton. My mom is actually listening to this right now. That is what I would recommend. I would recommend that you experience this book as an audiobook because he narrates it, even if you're not a Harry Potter fan. So my mom is definitely not. And so she's not going to get some of the references that he makes, but he has a way of writing, a way of speaking and telling his story that is so engaging and wholesome. It's a pleasure to listen to him tell his story. And I just have not had an experience like that when reading an audiobook in a long time. I'm trying to think of another time, and I can't really think of anything. It was fascinating to read and to experience and to hear his story. Even if you don't support the Harry Potter author, you're trying to distance yourself from it, I still would recommend this because he tells his story. This is not a Harry Potter book. Yes, that's what made Tom Felton famous. I just come back to the fact that I didn't want it to end because it was just so enjoyable to experience listening to his story. So I highly recommend this book. Next we come to Tumble by Celia Perez. I used this to fulfill a city prompt. I have another one that I'll talk about later that this was one that I put on my pile of possibilities for one word in the title. I had already chosen another one, which I'll talk about in a moment because that was a host favorite and it would give me more currency, GRC. So the city that this fit was Movement in the title. And I looked and I saw it and I'm like, oh, yep, that fits perfectly. So Tumble. In this is a middle grade. It's an award winner. I'm definitely going to be keeping it on the shelves in my classroom. So at the outset of this novel, she is faced with the possibility of being adopted by her stepdad, who she loves. She's never really known much about her dad, and it's a really sore subject, and her mom always changes the subject, and she doesn't know why. And so in this book, she ends up, because that would mean, being adopted by her stepdad would mean that her dad is no longer, has any rights to her, not really her dad, except in the biological sense of the term. She wants to find out more about him before she says yes to this. And it's an exploration of that side of her family. And she gets more members of her family, but she also finds out why it's such a hard topic for her mom. This is very well done. Then we have another memoir. We have The Girl Who Smiled Beads. I used this to fulfill the prompt of 2 authors, both the Clementine and Elizabeth Well. Clementine told the story, Elizabeth Well wrote it, so I'm considering them co-authors. This was short but very hard-hitting. I would also recommend reading this as an audiobook because Robin Miles does the narration. Anything that Robin Miles does as a narrator, I automatically recommend. Robin Miles is amazing as a narrator. The way that this is told is very well done. So this is not told quite chronologically. It is, but it isn't. So there's 2 parts of it, and both of those parts are told chronologically, but those parts are woven together. One part is after she is in the US and has gone on Oprah and been reunited with her family. The other part is her experiences in Rwanda and other places in Africa as she and her sister flee so that they are not killed in the Rwandan genocide. Very hard-hitting, very well told. Next we have another huge standout for the month, and this is the one that I used for the one-word title, and that is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. Frederick Bachman knows how to write. The fact that his writing is so powerful and so well done, even in translation, hat tip to the translator because they do a fantastic job. This is translated from Swedish. This is also a series. I don't really know why it's a series, but I know that it is, and I'm going to try to get into the other books in the series. But in this book, you have a very, very small town in Sweden. The only thing that they have going for them is their hockey team. The whole town is hockey obsessed. And they happen to, at this point, have a really good hockey team who's doing really well and could bring more eyes, more attention, and more revenue possibly with the building of a hockey school. They are, at the start of this book, basically leading up to the semifinal and championship season, and then the final for this team. And something happens at a party after they celebrate their semifinal win. That thing basically ends up tearing the town apart. This book is not told through any one character. This is basically the story of this town. The way that Bachman tells this story, he doesn't make clear distinctions when he's shifting from one perspective to another, and usually that bothers me, but the way that he did it here is so well done. The rawness of the emotions that he portrays, the way that he's able to talk about that, the way that he's able to make analyses on society. There are so many times when I stopped and I read points to my mom because I was reading this on our trip to Chicago for the half marathon. There's just so much, and you just stop and you read it. And I read it to her, and it's just so impactful. And I've not read another book like this. This is going to be probably in my top 10 for the year. This book is just so powerful, and everyone in here is flawed but understandable, and the way that it's talked about is just, you can't look away from it. You have to stop and look at yourself and analyze, like, what would I do in that situation? How would I respond? Just so well done. I am running out of words to talk coherently about this book. Next we have Paper Names by Suzuyo, and I realized as I looked at this, when I mentioned that I read this on the trip to Chicago, I was thinking of this one. This is also a generational story. This one, I'll go back and what I said about this one applies for this one. When I said the thing about, I don't know how this is talking about real Americans, that still applies to this. The whole point of the story was not, what does it mean to be American? So that part confused me. This is still, when I said it was a 3.5-star read, I still stand by that. In Paper Names, this is also a generational story, and it's also an interesting story. It involves an age gap relationship where the older character meets the younger character when they're a child, but they don't start anything romantically until she's 18. That's still highly iffy. Does that other character turn out to be a scumbag? Yes. So this was not my favorite. I saw a lot of the aspects of it, and the way that it was written, I think it was well written. It just was not the story for me, so 3.5 stars. I realized, I said at the outset that I'm not going to talk in depth about all of these books, and I'm talking more about the books than I had planned. Oh well. The next one is the conclusion to a duology. Unfortunately, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm not going to mention it, I'm not going to show it, because it is published by an imprint of St. Martin's Press, and I'm still participating in the boycott. I really should look at these books better to make sure for all of them. Okay, the next one is one that I read for a prompt that has foiling on the cover, and also was my Buzzwordathon book for the month, because the buzzwordathon is repeated words, so we have the and the. It's The Witch and the Czar. I really wanted to like this one. I really did. But some of the things were just odd, and I did not expect the sort of story that we got. So unfortunately, see, I can't remember what I rated it. I think I rated it 3.5 stars. It might have scraped a 4 stars, but I'm not sure. So that was a little bit of a disappointment. All right, the next one is Loon Moon. This is a children's book. This is self-published. My cousin wrote this as her senior capstone project. She graduated from college, and I'm like, I feel really old because she was born when I was a junior in high school. This was so fun to read. She both wrote and illustrated it, and she did such a good job. I just think it was way more impactful for me because I could see a lot of my different family members in the images, and I read this for the prompt of self-published. Next we have His Name is George Floyd. This one I used for the prompt of name in the title. This book is a biography of George Floyd, and it also talks about a lot of the events that happened after his murder. Talks about the trial of his murderer and how people were responding, and this is very well done, well researched, put together excellently, and I highly recommend it. I feel this is also a book that I got off of Thrift Books, and it's a former library copy. This was published in 2022. There's only one reason, pretty much, that this would be taken off the shelves, library shelves, that quickly, and it makes me very sad because, yes, this did come from a Southern library, but I highly, highly recommend this book. And this is actually a book that my mom read before me. I tried to keep her supplied with recommendations, and I hadn't quite gotten to this on my audiobook. She read it, and then I read it, and we both were struck by so many of the things that were talked about in that book. The next book I have is Uncommon Grounds. I read this for the prompt of having footnotes. This is basically the only book that I had that had footnotes, and it's a history of coffee. That's basically all it is. Was it super impactful? No. Did I enjoy my time reading it? Yeah. When I was listening to it, it was basically like a podcast. Nothing to stand out. I will be keeping it because I love coffee, and I think this is well done, well written. Next we have Fablehaven, Grip of the Shadow Plague. I used this for a city prompt. It had to have nature on the cover, and you can see the trees. This is book 3 in that series. It also helps me with clearing series off my list from before I started watching BookTube. I also read this one so I could get to book 4 because there is a sightseeing prompt of reading book 4 in a series. I'm going to hopefully get to that later on this month. This worked a whole lot better for me than book 2 did, so that sort of cements that I'm going to be keeping this series, but I'm still reserving judgment until I've read books 4 and 5 to complete the series. Second to last, we have The Fall of Gondolin. This is one of the books where Christopher Tolkien took his father's works, added editorial notes and etc. to it. I think this was the last one that he worked on. He worked on it when he was in his 90s. And the only reason why I read this one is author uses initials. I mean, clearly. And the last one that I read in the first half of the month is Free Water. I used this one for the prompt of illustrated cover. So this tells the story of some children on a slave plantation who escaped and ended up living in the Great Dismal Swamp. And it's basically a story that tells more about some of those situations, because there were whole communities that would do that and live in this area and how they survived. There's multiple perspectives in here. I think it was well told. It didn't stand out to me as much as I had hoped, but it's definitely well told. Deals with a lot of issues. It is a little bit longer than a lot of middle grade books I think should be to appeal more to the middle grade students, but I'll definitely be keeping this on my shelves for that. So this video ended up being a little bit longer than I expected, but thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.